welcome to Creative Piecemeal Podcast, a podcast for creatives. I'm your host, Tammy Takeishi. Join me for compelling conversations with artists, actors, authors, musicians, and other creatives about the impact of the creative and fine arts in their lives and our ever-changing world. Thank you for listening. Hello, and welcome to another episode of Creative Piecemeal Podcast. This is Tammy Takeishi, your host. Today, I am delighted to have fashion designer and businesswoman Jessica Conick of Mount Indigo. Jessica started Mount Indigo as a passion project after working in the fashion industry for years and realizing that this is one of the most polluting industries in the world. She knew she had to do something to be part of the solution and spread awareness, but wanted to do it in a fun way. Mount Indigo is a curation of upcycled denim jackets and eco-friendly tees reworked with sassy, sustainable statements and art. Jessica wants people to feel empowered to wear their values, especially if it's something as non-controversial as please recycle or keep the planet Instagrammable. She says, I think of all of my pieces like a little sustainable fashion army out there trying to make the world a better place. That's a really wonderful sentiment, and I'm so excited to have you on the show today. Welcome.
Thanks for having me.
It is a delight to have you on here. I scoured through your website, and I absolutely love everything. There's a couple of t-shirts that I've already marked off that I'd like to get, so can't wait to get that. So we're going to get started with who or what inspired you to become a fashion designer?
So it's definitely not something that I, had as like a vision growing up. I actually, when I went to school, I've always loved making things, but when I went to school, I went to business school, definitely took some creative classes and then got into marketing. And so through a few different jobs, I ended up in a marketing position for a national women's brand, a national women's fashion brand, which I love. I love fashion in general and just creativity. But it was a couple years into that job that I actually saw a documentary called The True Cost, and it's really the true cost of fashion. And it kind of went behind the scenes and just showed, when they say the true cost, it's kind of the other side of when we brag about, oh, this was only $5. It's like, okay, well, what was the true cost of that? Like, why was that only $5 or $10? And it kind of showed the way that fast fashion and just huge quantities of fashion that we're all consuming and going through and forcing basically mostly like overseas factories to keep producing for cheaper and cheaper. The true cost is really the toll that takes on the environment and then also the people that are making our clothing. And so seeing that documentary blew my mind, not only because I definitely am someone that's not trying to go after labels. I used to pat myself on the back for getting 10 shirts for $100, and only paying $10 for each of them, and instead of getting one shirt for $100. And so I realized not only that I was part of the problem as a consumer, but then also the work that I did for my day job promoting just buy more, buy more, buy more, which is basically what you're doing when you're in fashion marketing, and realizing oh my gosh, I'm part of the problem, and what can I do to change that and to educate other people? Because once you know these things, you can't unknow them. Then you have to make a conscious decision of how you're going to let that knowledge kind of just change the way that you shop, change the way that you work if you're in the industry, and just change the way that you think about how just your everyday purchases and everyday what you're disposing, how that kind of affects the world. And so that just kind of led me on this journey to learn more about sustainable fashion and kind of what I could do to be impactful in it. And that's why I started the brand, was to just kind of get more involved in that effort.
I think it's fantastic what you're doing. Would you say that it's sort of a niche still in the fashion industry, the eco-friendly, or are there more people sort of jumping on that bandwagon?
When I first got interested and when I saw this documentary and kind of started down this journey, it was definitely still a niche. It was about 5 years ago that I, had this realization, saw the documentary. I worked really hard to try to create like a sustainability effort in the company that I worked for. And at the time, that was just not a focus of theirs. And it was a topic that was starting to be talked about in the fashion industry in general. And there was definitely a few eco-friendly brands here and there, but it wasn't super widespread. And luckily, over the past few years, especially the past year or so, it's actually become like the most talked about topic in the fashion industry. Kind of ironically, about a year ago, right before COVID hit, like sustainability was named like the number one topic in the fashion industry. And then COVID hit, and obviously that hurt the fashion industry a ton. So that became, the like emergency topic last year of everything, but also fashion industry, unless you were like a leggings brand, then you're golden. But circling back even now, it's really like sustainability and like diversity and inclusion and like so many things that have come up over the past year, but it's really all connected. I think like environmental justice and social justice, like all these things are connected to where people are realizing more and more that like the decisions that we make for what we purchase or the companies that we support have so many more impacts than just like, oh, I thought that was cute.
Agreed. And I think people in general are just becoming more aware of what they purchase, whether it's the food that they put in their bodies or whether or not their neighborhood recycles, and trying to do their part in terms of a carbon footprint and things of that nature.
Totally. And like, you don't have to be like an activist to make an impact. And I think that's what's really cool is that, like if this is something that someone's really passionate about and they have time, they can go above and beyond and get involved in all of that. But even just like living our everyday lives, like the little decisions we make every day can have like a huge impact.
So obviously, people go out and they may have closetfuls of clothes and it's spring cleaning time right now. Would you suggest, even if the clothes that they have that they want to donate aren't necessarily may or may not have been made eco-friendly, do you think that still donating and repurposing will still help the environment?
Totally. Repurposing is like one of the best things that you can possibly do. Like never throw clothes away, even if it seems like a crappy old t-shirt. If you donate it to Goodwill or Salvation Army or like any of, places that take donated clothes, even if it's something that they cannot sell, they are connected to recycling services that will take their unwanted fabrics and will recycle them. So one of my friends here in St. Louis, he actually owns the biggest textile recycling plant in the Midwest. Basically, he has a huge warehouse filled with bales of t-shirts. Like literally, it's like a scene out of like a documentary. But they take those t-shirts and they cut them up into rags and use them for like sell them as cleaning supplies so that they don't need to make new products to be used as cleaning supplies to like clean up a dirty floor on like a oil rig or something, so it's like amazing what infrastructure is out there to recycle even the clothes that we think no one will want. So always recycle your clothes. Always if you're looking for something, like check to see if you can buy it used first. I love buying on like Poshmark or like going to resale shops. It's kind of fun to give yourself a goal of like maybe 25% or 50%, or some people even say that they only buy, upcycled used clothing. And it can obviously be a lot more affordable as well.
Agreed. And you can sometimes find some really amazing deals on things that are super fashionable or used to be really expensive. And maybe it's like a couple seasons old, but it'll still work for like that business meeting or something like that.
Totally. And it's actually kind of fun. I don't know. Have you ever used Poshmark?
I have not. I'm a thrift store person, or at least I was before the pandemic. I'll have to check out Poshmark.
Yeah. So what's kind of cool about that, it's kind of like an eBay, but like just for clothes. They have introduced like home goods and things like that. But I think one of my favorite things is like, if I'm out and about somewhere and I see someone with like a really cute sweater, I might say like, oh my gosh, I love your sweater. Where's it from? And they might say like, oh, this was from Anthropologie, but like 4 years ago. That doesn't matter. Like I just like look it up on Poshmark and 9 times out of 10, you can find something that you're looking for. So it's kind of like a fun activity also. And then I sell a lot of clothes on there as well.
So it's almost like a eco-friendly clothing treasure hunt.
Oh, totally. But yeah, and so that's like a great way to recycle too. You know, if you don't want to just donate your clothing, like if you want to sell it, you can sell it locally at, local thrift shops near you, or you can sell it online. So I kind of sometimes even think of things as like investment pieces. If you like buy something quality, knowing that when you're done with it, it will hold value so that you can sell it or, gift it to someone.
You've been in the fashion design industry for a long time, and of course, you have your own store and your own brand, Mount Indigo. I was wondering, what is your creative process like when you're designing a new shirt or when you're thinking of a new phrase? Like, how do you design? Like, how do you create?
I have so many different like ideas that just kind of pop into my head of like a phrase that I want to put onto a jacket or a shirt. So I kind of have like a list going, like whenever an idea pops into my head. And then when I know that I'm ready to launch the next, shirt or jacket, sometimes I'll send a few ideas to some friends so that they can at least talk me off of a ledge if one of my ideas is like not sellable. So I kind of let them narrow it down. But sometimes things just like pop into my head. Like one of my tanks says, if you want to be my lover, you got to get with my bins, but there's like a recycling sign. And honestly, I like was in a friend's birthday, like party bus, and like that Spice Girls song came on. And it was like one of those days where I'd been trying to think of phrases for my next shirt. And I just heard that song lyric and was like, oh my gosh, I can like make this into like a fun kind of like rework it for this shirt. So like a lot of the phrases that I use might be like funny phrases that you've heard like in a different version. And so I'll make it something that's like funny and like eco-friendly.
I love that. That particular shirt you're talking about really caught my eye. And it's funny because I actually have like multiple recycling bins at my house because, I've got the big one from the city and then I got one for the kitchen and I thought it was going to be like tall size of a trash can. It's tiny.
Oh yeah.
It's really small. And I'm like, well, at least I'm recycling, even though it's small.
Make it easy access. You can have them all over.
Right.
It drives me crazy when I'm out and about places and I have something to recycle and like I can't find a recycling bin anywhere. I can't help it. I'll just like carry that thing with me. Like I've carried bottles or, cans across like the country if I'm like traveling in an airport or something. And I'm like, I will not throw it away. Like I cannot bring myself to, like I will find a recycling bin at some point.
Speaking of recycling and upcycling and repurposing, do you have any tips for people who maybe want to try turning their own clothes into something else? Like what would you suggest would be one of the easiest things to do?
So get on Pinterest probably and search upcycle plus, whatever you're looking for. Like one of the easiest things to upcycle are probably like t-shirts. There's so many things you can do that are like easy for almost anyone in terms of like cutting a sleeve off or like fringing at the bottom or turning it into a tank top. So that's probably the easiest thing. And like we all have so many t-shirts that we don't even probably know what to do with. And so yeah, that's probably the best place to start is maybe trying to do some fun upcycling things with t-shirts. But I think like, obviously if you know how to even do like basics on a sewing machine or hand sewing, that definitely helps because a lot of people that upcycle will like sew different pieces of different garments together. But yeah, I would say Pinterest is probably like a great place to start.
That sounds really cool. I'm not very creative in that manner, but I'm sure there's lots of listeners out there who could do something with their clothes this spring as we're all spring cleaning.
Yeah. And I think, upcycling is definitely getting more popular. Like one of the things that surprised me the most when I started this was that obviously everyone knows by this point that like the younger the generation is, the more they're probably into like sustainability and brands, conscious brands. But I was really pleasantly surprised to hear that Gen Z, especially, a lot of them refuse to buy new, like they'll only buy sustainable. And a lot of them are like really into upcycling. So the whole like patchwork, funky upcycled look is like a really big trend among like Gen Z and a lot of like younger kids.
That is really neat.
There's so many brands nowadays that will make, this isn't like anything new, like brands making things look like they're old and vintage, but there's a lot of brands that make brand new clothes to look like they are upcycled because it's like the look is a trend.
That is very interesting. I guess sort of like the faded screen print type thing. And
yeah. Like, so the concept isn't anything new. Like brands have, always tried to make things look vintage or like pre-rip holes in brand new jeans, that kind of thing. But the whole like upcycled patchwork look of when people are stitching different pieces of like old clothes together, now brands are making things brand new that to have that look.
So we're going to pivot a little bit and talk more about business. And I was wondering, what is one of the biggest challenges that you have currently with your business because of the pandemic?
Fashion in general, people aren't buying a lot of clothes right now or the past year, just because people really do kind of buy clothes to go to like events that they have coming up or trips or things like that. So I think, you know, a lot of all those events have been canceled. And then a lot of events that I would have done pop-ups at have been canceled too. So like we kind of talked a little bit about before the interview, you know, like this is still very much kind of like a little startup passion project for me. So most of my business I've done through pop-up events, which is great because people can try the clothes on and really get to see them in person. So pretty much all those events were canceled last year. So just like, you know, kind of having a halt on that, but having like purchased, you know, inventory and that was definitely hard last year.
I can imagine, you know, across so many businesses, that's probably been something that took everybody by surprise, really.
And what's hard is, you know, generally in the fashion industry, what they've done to stay alive is to just discount everything, which is part of the problem because people get used to just really cheap stuff. So like I haven't let myself do that, but then you're like sitting on stock.
Well, it's important to know your worth and set those prices and be okay with that. You're an eco-friendly brand. You've got this passion project. You know, if you were to heavily discount, it would be a lot harder than if you were a huge big box store, for example.
Right. And it's hard because you have to kind of hold yourself to different standards when you're trying to prove a point with your business, you know, so it's like you can't just do what everyone else is doing because that's kind of like part of the problem.
What has been one of the biggest positives that you've had in this last year?
Oh my gosh, I really do think there's been so many positives. I think just having the opportunity, like we all have, to just like take a step back and like look at the world a little differently was huge. I think for me, like I was definitely focused really heavily on like the environmental side of sustainability, while knowing that like there was a huge social justice side of sustainability as well, which is another thing that documentary, The True Cost, really showed. And I think this past year reminded me that I really needed to connect the two, like environmental justice and social justice are so hand in hand in sustainability. So going into 2021 and, you know, going forward with my business, I think I'm excited to just kind of like make sure that I'm like weaving both of those points together.
I think that's wonderful. Always good to be aware of what's happening in the world. Do you think that is going to inspire any future ideas or t-shirt ideas or anything like that?
Yeah. So for one of my most recent jacket that I did over the summer, the back of it says "Love People, Love Planet," and that was kind of like my first design that really just made sure to tie in, you know, both sides of sustainability together. I think so many people, you know, we talk a lot about the environmental impact of the industry, but sometimes it's not focused on enough. Just like the really sad fact that there's a lot of not only women, but just all these people overseas that we kind of are like out of sight, out of mind, and just think, oh, it's just these people that we don't know in these third world countries that are making these products. And when you really see the way that they live and just the way that they're treated, all to give us cheap clothing, you realize that is just as bad as so many other forms of social injustice that we see in our country. And so, you know, it's hard to face that because we're all buying products that probably we got on a good deal because that's the reality of it. But, you know, it's just good to kind of know that in the back of your head, and it gives you motivation, you know, even if some people are, you know, everyone has those topics that they really care strongly about. So even if someone necessarily isn't that big into like environmentalism, I think seeing another human being treated so terribly to make just cheap clothes for us like really hits your heart in a different way, and like just is another kind of motivator that makes you think twice next time you make you know, a purchase decision.
Definitely. How can you justify this acute purchase when you know that it may be really negatively affected another person, you know, even if you've never met them?
Totally. And like, I mean, it's still hard for me to this day to like turn my head when I see something really cute and cheap when I'm, at the store. So it's like something that you have to kind of keep top of mind and like maybe make sure that every once in a while you're like putting those facts and like, watching those documentaries or reading the articles, just kind of every once in a while to keep it real to you. Cause when things are so out of sight, out of mind to us, in America, it makes it hard to kind of stay in touch with that reality.
And environmentalism as a whole is obviously very important to you. Is there a certain sector that you're more curious to learn about right now?
Honestly, just like kind of just getting to the bottom of like what is the most sustainable way of doing things. One of the things that was really focused on in the documentary The True Cost that I mentioned was the cotton industry. And obviously cotton is a huge material used in fashion for t-shirts, for jeans, for so many things. And so there's a lot of talk about using like organic cotton or using sustainable cotton or using like American made cotton versus cotton grown in other countries. Like in that documentary, they showed cotton grown in India, but the point was kind of like some climates really should never be used to make certain crops. So it's just like unsustainable across the board to try to grow a crop in certain climates. So it's, like there's just kind of different questions around like what is the most sustainable way to grow cotton? Is it organically or is it sustainability through other methods? And so that was definitely something I'm really interested in trying to get to the bottom of, because there's a lot of topics in sustainability where it's just like a big gray area. Like you can say, well, this, not that, but then you can point to like some other cause and effect down the road. Like some people say, vegan leather over regular leather. Well, like vegan leather is basically pleather, which is plastic, and we don't want to create more plastic. So I think what's kind of hard right now is really pinpointing what are the most sustainable practices in fashion, because you can look at things from a lot of different viewpoints.
It sounds like there's a lot for the average consumer to sort of dig through and unpack, but it's not insurmountable. It just is going to take a little bit of research to really be as eco-friendly as one really can be, it seems.
Yeah. And that's, I think, one thing that makes the topic hard is that even people that are interested in it might not necessarily like know all the facts. One thing that's kind of interesting with it is that it like you said, it kind of ties to like even the food we eat, what we're putting in our bodies, especially when you think about it from like a crop level, like the cotton topic. So it definitely makes you think twice about more than just like your fashion purchases too.
You've veered from being in the fashion industry to branching out on your own. Has your life in the creative arts been different than you imagined, like for better, for worse, or is this just a whole new avenue?
Honestly, I think that's what's kind of dangerous is that whatever I imagine, I sometimes will just go after it. So I don't really, it's not really different than I imagined, because when I'm like, oh, this sounds great, I just kind of like end up going after it, which is kind of cool, but it's also sometimes I need to tame that a little bit. So it's not that different, because like when I do think about like, oh, maybe I should try this, I'll tend to like go after it and kind of like, and actually see in real life what that idea really was about.
Well, there's nothing wrong with that, being tenacious and going for your dreams, that's how we get where we are.
Mm-hmm.
And that's how you end up with a beautiful, beautiful store and such amazing clothes. They're eco-friendly. I know that I haven't bought any new clothes at all since the pandemic started, but after connecting with you, it made me really think twice about once I do have to refresh my wardrobe about maybe going more to thrift stores or checking out eco-friendly shops online, whereas I had not done that as much in the past.
That's so great. And yeah, there's so many brands, small all the way to gigantic, well-known brands that are making their products so much more sustainably these days. So, I think in the past people thought like, oh gosh, I'm just going to have to go get some like ugly, like rice sack if I want to be eco-friendly. And now you can get pretty much anything made in an eco-friendly way, which is great.
If you didn't have any limitations or budgets or any barriers on a product, what do you think that you would create?
Oh my gosh, probably so many things. I love making things in general. And so I would probably go after, like I'd probably get on Pinterest myself and make all the projects that I've wanted to make. But with Mount Indigo, probably like the first step for me is always going out and finding used jackets, from resale shops and online. Because that's what I do is I upcycle used denim jackets. And so it would give me the ability to go get a lot of those. And then I would probably hire an assistant and an accountant, because this whole dealing with taxes and making sure that you're checking off all your financial requirements and everything and like trying to just do that as like a side thing has definitely been overwhelming. So yeah, I'd probably set myself up with a little team and then be able to go save more denim jackets.
That sounds like a wonderful plan. And I'm sure, like, even though your store is still young, that if I talked to you in a couple of years, you'd probably already be there.
Hopefully, that would be great.
What is one thing that you can't live without?
Oh my gosh, I remember reading that and like I'm so bad at narrowing things down. Like the things that pop into my head literally are like my chapstick, my hair tie, like just things like that. My cell phone. I really, I couldn't pinpoint just one thing. What's your one thing that you can't live without?
That's such a tough question. I think I would have to say my cell phone, since I use it all the time for both work as well as connecting for podcasting and things like that.
It is pretty amazing what they can do.
It is. It's too bad we haven't quite gotten there yet with repurposing cell phones, but at least they have recycling bins and things like that.
Yeah, I'm sure the craziest things happen with our old phones that we can't even imagine.
Right? Yeah, I know. Like I think I still have one of my very first ones hanging around just because it's like, well, where am I supposed to take this?
I know, like those old like Nokia ones.
So I've been very curious, since you've worked in the design field, what is a common myth about that field or a stereotype?
I would say for actual fashion designers working in fashion design, people probably think that they're like super like hoity-toity or just like fashion elitists. And like most fashion designers, I think, are just really creative people trying to like have a job where they can just create things all the time and do art for a living. And most of them probably just wear, like a lot of them just wear black all the time, because it's like they're actually like just artists trying to create things and not necessarily people that are, like wearing like high fashion all the time.
Yeah, I always notice that, like, see the stereotype that they may be super fashion conscious in what they wear and they're always dressed to the nines, but like you said, we're all just artists, we're all wanting to make something and express ourselves and make an impact in the world.
Totally.
Do you have a favorite memory or a funny story about your time sort of creating Mount Indigo from the ground up?
I think the funniest things were probably when I was trying to think of a name. And so I would like text different names that popped into my head. Like every day there would be like a new name that I'd be like, oh my gosh, like this would be great. And so I would like text it to a couple different girlfriends that are like either in the fashion industry or like own their own companies also, that we bounce ideas off of. And they would be like, oh my gosh, no, like, no. And so then and then I'd be like, okay, yeah, I get it for whatever reason. So I think like when I picked Mount Indigo, like none of them were like, no. So that one kind of stuck. And indigo and denim obviously go together. So that was just kind of funny. It was like the random things that popped into my head that I'm glad I did not name the company now. Or like you'd think of a name and as most of us do nowadays, before we even check to see if like the www at is available, we go on Instagram to see if like someone's already taken that Instagram profile. Always like some random person that took that Instagram profile hasn't used it in like 5 years and had like 2 posts. And you're like, oh my gosh. And like you reach out to them and they never respond. So it's like taken and not even being used. And you're like, now I have to rename my whole brand because the Instagram profile's taken.
I feel that struggle. It took me a long time to think of a name for my podcast.
Yeah, that's like that. I know, it's so funny the things we get hung up on. but they're important.
Definitely. It really is, because it's the first thing that a person may see or encounter with your brand. And I remember for me, when I heard Mount Indigo was the name of your company, I just remember thinking like nature and refreshing. And of course, like you said, indigo and denim. And so I think it really works just perfectly for your brand company.
It was originally going to be more like an outdoorsy or like travel based, like to think concept. Like I had a lot. So the mountain kind of was played more of a piece in its original idea, but I love where I landed with upcycling denim jackets.
And you said you're based in the St. Louis area. I know that, because of our current situation, people aren't always able to come see your pop-up shops. Is that something that'll happen in the near future?
I will probably start doing some more pop-up events this year, especially because with the weather getting better, there's a lot more events outside, and maybe someday we'll be, traveling a bit with them. But I do try to keep like my main designs on my website too, and on social media.
And something cool for the listeners, we're going to be running a giveaway so that you'll be able to enter and win one of Jessica's amazing t-shirts, eco-friendly t-shirts. So keep a lookout for those posts there.
Yes, I love doing the t-shirts and the jackets. The t-shirts are all made on eco-friendly blanks. And of course you have to wear a t-shirt under your jacket. So they go very well together.
What are some of the best resources you recommend for someone else wanting to start their own fashion business or even entering in the fashion design world?
So I've been connected with a professional organization for people in fashion, beauty, and home called Fashion Group International. You're based in Houston, right?
Yes.
So there is a chapter in Houston as well, and there's a chapter in St. Louis. So I would say getting involved in Fashion Group International is a great way to start. It's people in the fashion industry, and they hold professional events and share resources. And then you're kind of connected not only to other fashion professionals in your area, but then worldwide. And then also just making sure that you're staying up to date on fashion publications like the Business of Fashion, WWD, that type of thing. But I think it's really important to connect with other fashion professionals. And I think starting just where you are in your city, every city really has like a startup fashion community, no matter where you are. Like people don't think of St. Louis as being a fashion city, but we're like a huge fashion city for fashion businesses. So just, starting local, getting involved locally, but then making sure you're reading up on fashion business news as well is great.
Excellent advice. I didn't even realize that there was an entire group of fashion designers, but it makes sense, bouncing ideas off each other and things like that, having conferences.
Yeah. And now that things are so virtual, oh my gosh, it's so easy to tap into a lot of these resources and events and seminars. And people are, I think probably in every city, very wanting to help each other out and support their local fashion community. So that's always great. And especially when you get involved in those organizations, like since I'm in, Fashion Group International, it's like I could reach out to a designer or someone in the industry, like in any city that's a member, and just start the conversation with, I'm a member of FGI, and then that's just like immediately like a door opener.
Is there something that you wish you knew when you first started in the industry?
Yes. I mean, I will say when I first started, I worked for, a huge company that had like 1 million people, doing all the different parts of the business. And so when you start your own company, you're doing all the different parts of the business, obviously on a much smaller level. You always kind of tend to gravitate towards the things that are the most fun. And then it's like, you have to right now I'm like trying to work backwards to do my taxes, for my business. And it's like so much harder than when you're doing your taxes and you're just given like a form from your work to type into TurboTax or whatever. So yeah, like when you're just starting out, it's like you do have to kind of make sure that you're doing all the things you need to do along the process and not just gravitating to the things that are exciting to you, which is what I have totally done, especially since it's like a hobby business. You can keep telling yourself that, but at the end of the day, you still have to do some of the crappy things that you don't really feel like doing.
Understandable. It sounds like for anyone who's doing a passion project that's more business oriented, you just can't avoid that.
Yeah. And it's hard because it can definitely be like a creative stifler, but you just have to push through it.
Excellent. Well, before we go, where can our listeners connect with you and your website on social media?
So I am online at www.mountindigo.com, and that's spelled out MOUNTINDIGO. And then on social media, I'm at the same, at Mount Indigo, on Instagram and Facebook.
What are some goals you have for 2021? Where can we see Mount Indigo going in 2021?
I'll give you a little scoop that I haven't told anyone, but since puff sleeves are super in right now, I'm not wearing my puff sleeve shirt because we can see each other right now when we're talking. But I'm going to be doing a puff sleeve upcycle denim jacket that I'm really excited about. So working on that, and then probably just doing some like fun, more artwork. Like my main jackets that I've been doing, I get printed, like, so a screen printer prints, my art on the back, but I've got a lot of like fun ideas for just like actually doing individual, like handmade artwork on some of the jackets. So dabbling in that a little bit too.
Awesome. That sounds exciting. And I definitely look forward to seeing that come up in your shop.
Thank you. I'm excited too.
Cool. Well, listeners, be sure to tune in and check out Jessica Conick and her business Mount Indigo, where she sells upcycled and eco-friendly denim jackets and shirts. And also be sure to check out social media for a chance to win one of the free eco-friendly t-shirts. And Jessica, thanks again for being on the show. It was wonderful to have you on here and learn more about sustainability. I know it's certainly made no pun intended, made an impact in the way that I'd like to shop going forward.
Awesome. Well, let me know if you're ever looking for ideas for any sustainable brands, because there's luckily so many out there right now.
All right. Thank you. And have a great day, listeners. Thanks for listening to the podcast. Like the show? Have a question? Stop by the Facebook and Instagram pages. Links are in the show notes, or search for Creative Piecemeal Podcast on social media and click follow for all the latest.